So it's Wednesday night and time for a midweek Wardy's Waffle. I have got quite a bit from the conference, NFU conference I'm putting up, that was yesterday, that was Tuesday. I've got a lot of Tom Bradshaw's speech, which was absolutely excellent, really, really good points made. And also Steve Reed, the Secretary of State of DEFRA. For those of you who aren't from this country who watch this channel, DEFRA is the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and they're the ones that set the rules that we have to farm by, if you like, and how we operate. So that's who they are. So, and these are the ones, DEFRA's the ones, and Steve Reed's the ones with the Treasury and the government's causing all the problems with farming. So I've got him answering some questions. I've also got the farmers who were protesting and held up banners in front of him. I've got all that on this camera, on this film as well. So thanks ever so much for watching. It is going to be about 50 minutes long. You can skip through it if you like, but I've got lots of points that Steve Reed says. And yes, we've heard it all before. We've heard it all with Keir Starmer 3 years ago when he said everything we wanted to hear, but none of it's come to fruition because it's all been a load of porkies. So anyway, we'll see. Make your own mind up, but please, if you can sit and watch to the end, it'd be fantastic because you actually hear lots of things that's been said and lots of booing and cheering that we all were doing in the audience as well. Anyway, that's it for the intro. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the end. It's Tuesday morning, about, what time is it, 7:30? 7:30ish, on the train, as you can see. I've got David Armstrong next to me, local farmer from Bardley, and Henry Morton as well. And we're off down to see who we're going to see. City Steve. We've got the NFU Farming Conference.
Oh, Shitty
Steve. So anyway, we'll see whether that's appropriate or not, whether that's right, because it might be. It might well be. We'll see what he's got to say. Are you going to ask him a question?
I'm letting you do the talking.
For the first time. Henry?
I haven't got any questions.
I haven't got any questions. Right, well, we're gonna. I've put one in to ask him about all this foreign money going abroad to other farmers, so we'll see whether it gets asked or not. Anyway, we've got him, and we've got a whole day down in London at the NFU Conference, so we'll see how we get on today and be back later on tonight. Right, that's it. We've got to King's Cross now. Got the tie back on, just so I'm properly dressed. We'll crack on in and get the underground and head across to the QE2 centre near Westminster. You're right, just got in the Farmers Club, just having breakfast. I've just lent David my power block because he forgot to put his phone on charge today. This way. Got plenty of time before the conference starts, about 2 hours nearly. We're just walking down Whitehall now. This is where we're going to be next week. Going to have all the machinery here that is needed to make a pancake, apart from obviously milking parlour and poultry sheds and things like that, but all the moving equipment and machinery is going to be here. So if you're about next Tuesday, March the 4th, Shrove Tuesday, Pancake Day, please come and join us. Don't bring a tractor, and we're going to march. We've got a route down Whitehall, along Northumberland to Trafalgar Square, along Northumberland Avenue. There's a load of protesters, I don't know what they're doing, not farmers. Along Embankment, across up there to Parliament Square, finish off there. And we're going to get some pancakes made as well, hopefully, and get them out to MPs and the public, so come along. And there we have the entrance to Downing Street. UK agriculture's one of the biggest problem at the QE2 centre here just behind. And we have a lovely show of tractors. So we're just going in now. Just queuing up now to get our name badges. That's my queue. So we're sat down, the conference about to start. Good showing of people here. Got my minders with me, still kept tabs on me. David as well, Henry.
Find the solutions. Today, I want to talk about how we can do that in our businesses. But as we all know, farming is a little different in that many of the solutions lay in the hands of others. Much of our ability to deliver stability and growth lays in the hands of government. There were only 87 words in the Labour manifesto about agriculture. But some of those words gave us great hope and even belief for the future. Promises on imports, binding targets for British food for the public sector, a recognition that food security is national security. On most of these we're still hoping, but we recognise that these are still early days for a new government. But ministers had hardly found their way to their new desks when they broke their first promise. And it's the one which overshadows all else, wiping out our ability to plan, to invest, and often to hope. It hangs over our farms, our families, our future, the family farm tax. On the day of the mass lobby in Raleigh, I spoke to a young lad called Henry. Henry was leading from the front, driving his toy tractor. Many of you have seen that picture behind me, but you don't know the story behind that conversation. Henry wants to be a farmer, like so many of us. He wants to continue his family's proud custodianship of the countryside. He wants to produce food, protect the environment, provide for his family and for the nation. There are thousands of Henrys, farming sons and daughters across the country, but the Chancellor has put their future at risk. Let me be clear, this policy is morally wrong and economically flawed. It's wrong because we were all promised it wouldn't happen. And Conference, when you make a promise to farmers, you keep it. Former tenant farmers too, people who have scraped everything together, risked it all to finally buy their farm. Now they face a tax bill they cannot pay. I worry about the next generation, like Henry, whose entire future in the industry is now in question. But most of all, I fear for the elderly farmers. I think of the grandson who wrote to me about his 94-year-old grandfather. This isn't just money, this is blood, sweat and tears. The farm was their life's work. But as they've grown older, the farm has also become their pension, because that's what they were told to do. On the 30th of October, that all changed, with no warning, and the mental health pressures on our industry today are unbearable and unacceptable. As difficult as this is for me to say, and you to hear, many older farmers are now facing that very real dilemma, that unless they die before April 2026, their families will face a family farm tax bill they simply cannot afford to pay. What a cruel position to put elderly people in, by no way of warning, by way of a broken promise. Government, you must correct this urgently. All the major opposition parties have said so, and I'm pleased that the NFU has secured written commitments that if they were to form a future government, they will overturn the changes proposed. And they're not alone. The agricultural valuers say so, the CBIs say so, even Labour's own tax advisors say so. And I also today want to commend those principled Labour MPs who've had the decency to speak out. I know that this has been recognised and welcomed by your farming constituents. And in an unprecedented move, thanks to lobbying from the NFU, all of the UK's major supermarkets have joined forces in asking for the government to stop and consult about the tax. For this Chancellor, that's the worst episode of Supermarket Sweep ever. The Secretary of State has said that this was the straw which broke the camel's back. I agree with him. Years of spiralling input costs, bad trade deals by the last government, a botched phase out of BPS, unfair supply chains. But Secretary of State, if you knew how close the camel's back was to breaking, why introduce not just the family farm tax, but also a fertiliser tax, a tax on double cab pickups, and the biggest ever reduction in BPS? I'm proud of what our union has achieved so far in fighting this tax. An industry united. In November, almost 2,000 of you joined us here in London at the NFU's Mass Lobby, and many of you also joined the successful rally. We met more than 230 MPs in a single day. In January, farmers from across the UK, from Shetland to the Scilly Isles, from Giant's Causeway to Dover, and from Anglesey to Abergavenny, stood together to thank the British public for their support in a show of unity. And that public support is absolutely vital. Last month, Alan and I, on behalf of the 4 UK farming unions, delivered a petition to number 10 Downing Street, signed by over 275,000 people, calling for the family farm tax to be scrapped. And just this morning, conference, 3 generations of the same farming family have delivered toy tractors to the Treasury. Every one sent by a farming family which will be devastated by these proposed changes. Every one carrying a heartfelt message. Conference, there are thousands of those toy tractors, a poignant reminder of the impact this awful policy will have on the future of farming. As for me, I've repeatedly said I will meet the Chancellor. Rural Labour MPs have asked the Chancellor to meet me. The chair of the EFRA Select Committee has said it's unacceptable she won't meet me. And I suspect that the Secretary of State would also like her to meet me. Perhaps, if I offered to meet her in Davos, she would be more willing. What the Chancellor has said is that nobody has offered solutions or alternatives. So last week, together with farming organisations and all of the farming unions, we took a solution to Treasury after being summoned by ministers. And what happened? They simply sent us away with the sound of a slamming door ringing in our ears. Conference, they are not interested. But politicians are human, however difficult it is to remember that. They make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But the mark of the man or woman is not getting everything right. It's having the courage to accept that you're wrong, the respect for others to correct it. The government didn't think the family farm tax would make the headlines. Then after a week, they thought the headlines would go away. Then after a month, they thought we would go away. But we cannot go away, and we will not go away. So conference, let us send a message clearly from this room today, alongside our fellow farming unions across Britain. We will not stop. We will not give in. We will fight this family farm tax until ministers do the right thing. And then we can move on, because it's not like producing the country's food has gotten any easier over the last 12 months. Bad policy, geopolitics, unprecedented weather has left some sectors of UK farming in the worst cash flow crisis ever. Last year, I stood on a farm in Lincolnshire with water as far as the eye could see. Some farmers planted crops 3 times because the first 2 efforts got washed away. We've just had the wettest 18 months on record and one of the worst harvests ever. This is a time when the government should be prioritising food security, as they promised to do in the election, in their manifesto. The government can and must create an environment which gives farmers confidence and the ability to invest in food production for the future. Frankly, this government needs a reset moment with farming, where they face up to the reality of how much the industry is struggling. Conference, when you gave me the honour of electing me your president last year, my focus was on providing solutions for our industry. Policies which will underpin confident, sustainable, profitable businesses, producing food for 70 million British consumers and protecting our precious countryside. So today, I am renewing that effort with the launch of the NFU's new policy blueprints, our detailed vision of what's needed across our industry so that every sector can succeed, both for itself and the nation. The blueprints are the culmination of months of NFU policy work, specific solutions for government that will help farming and growing and help ministers achieve their policy aims. They are a win-win. Today I want to share some of the highlights from the blueprints that we are launching. Let's start with the supply chain. I know how many of you are exasperated by it. We cannot have a resilient supply of British food without change. The Grocery Code Adjudicator has been a great bonus for our industry. And let's remember, it was the NFU that got it set up in the first place. But our blueprints show that by widening the powers of the adjudicator in 2 ways, the Secretary of State can make a real difference. Now, Conference, it'll be no surprise to hear that Steve and I have had some pretty difficult conversations over the past few months. The easiest thing Steve could have done today is not turn up. But he has, because he respects the crucial role of the NFU. So I urge you all, please let's hear him in that spirit. Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Tom, for inviting me here to speak today. I've been to NFU Conference before, of course, but this is my first time attending as Secretary of State for DEFRA. And I want to personally thank you, Tom, for our work together since I took up this role last July. You were the first visitor in my office after the election, and you've been back more since then than anyone else as well. The conversation between us is invaluable as we navigate the farming transition together. And I'm grateful for your views, Tom, even where we've disagreed. You set that out in your speech, and I was listening to it. Plain speaking, as you always do. And I know it's reflected here today, and the protests that we've seen in recent months in Westminster and around the country. But even if the conversation gets difficult, I will always show up to have it, because I respect this union and I respect British farming. Now, I can't give the answer I know many of you want on inheritance tax, but I want you to know that I understand the strength of feeling in the room and in the sector. You can see an example of that right in front of me now. And I am sorry, it's a decision that we've had to take. Like I said, I'm always going to turn up to have the conversation with you. There's an opportunity to ask questions afterwards, and it might be better to ask them in that way, because I've got an awful lot that I think will be of interest to other people who are hearing them today who might want to hear what we've got to say, about that. Now, I've heard many farmers describing that particular decision as the final straw. And the truth is, those straws have been piling up for many, many years. Tom, you were outlining many of them in your speech. This sector is facing high input costs, tight margins, and unfairness in the supply chain. You've struggled to get enough workers to pick your fruits and veg. Frankly, you've been sold out in past trade deals. Farmland is increasingly at risk from severe flooding and drought. And this all comes together as we face the biggest transition for farming in generations, moving away from the basic payment scheme to more sustainable methods of farming. The underlying problem in this sector is that farmers do not make enough money for the hard work and commitment that they put in. I will consider my time as Secretary of State a failure if I do not improve profitability for farmers up and down this country. Today, I can announce I will set up a new farming profitability unit within the department to drive that goal. I want to outline what the government is doing to tackle the deep-rooted problems holding the sector back. Because time and again, I hear farmers say that they do not make a fair profit for the food they produce. And it is only by overcoming these long-standing challenges that we can create the conditions for your farming businesses to succeed. Achieving this starts by treating farms as the businesses they are. That's something, in my view, the previous government forgot. Farmers have repeatedly told me they want to stand on their own 2 feet. They are proud people, and rightly so. But it is paternalistic and patronising for government to treat farmers as if they are not operating in a marketplace in which they need to turn a decent profit. I worked in business for 16 years, with responsibility every year for driving up profit and driving down costs. British farming has some of the hardest working, most creative people anywhere in the British workforce. But a sector that isn't profitable doesn't have a future. I know that from my own long experience in business. My focus is on ensuring farming becomes more profitable, because that is the best way to make your businesses viable for the future. And that's how we ensure the long-term food security this country needs. This approach will underpin our 25-year farming roadmap and our food strategy, where we'll work in partnership with farmers to make farming and food production sustainable and profitable. We'll work with farmers and stakeholders to build that roadmap together, covering every part of the sector. And the first workshops will start next week. The roadmap stands on 3 principles. First, a sector that has food production at its core. The role of farming will always be to produce the food that feeds our nation. The instability we see across the world shows us why it's so important we help farmers to get this right. Second, a sector where farm businesses are more resilient in withstanding the shocks that periodically disrupt farming: severe flooding, drought, animal disease. We will help farmers who wanted to diversify their income to put more money into their business so they can survive these more difficult times when they come. Third, a sector that recognises restoring nature is not in competition with sustainable food production, but is essential to it. It's only by pursuing all 3 of these principles and recognising that farms are businesses that need to be profitable that we can guarantee national food security and a thriving food production and farming sector. Our new deal for farmers is supporting farmers to produce food sustainably and profitably. It won't all happen overnight, but we are already making changes. Tom has repeatedly told me farmers need certainty about seasonal workers. I've listened, Tom, and I'm pleased to announce that we are extending the seasonal worker visas for 5 years. That on its own is not the long-term solution. We will need to reduce the number of seasonal workers coming to the UK in the future. But I recognise your businesses need stability over the coming years as we work at pace to embrace innovation, develop the agri-tech and invest in new farming practices so you can reduce your reliance on seasonal workers as quickly as possible. We are making the supply chain fairer with new regulations for the pig sector coming in by the end of next month, in March, to make sure contracts clearly set out expectations and only allow changes if they've been agreed by all parties. We're engaging with industry on similar proposals for eggs and for fresh produce. For the first time ever, we are measuring where the public sector buys food from, so we can use the government's own purchasing power to back British produce wherever we can. I've worked with my colleague Pat McFadden in the Cabinet Office to create new requirements for government catering contracts to favour high quality, high welfare products that British producers are well placed to meet. This means British farmers and producers can compete for a fairer share of the £5 billion a year the public sector spends on food. That's money straight into farmers' bank accounts to boost turnover and boost profits. Ours is an outward-facing trading nation, but I want to be clear. We will never lower our food standards in trade agreements. We will promote robust standards nationally and internationally, and will always consider whether overseas produce has an unfair advantage. British farming deserves a level playing field where you can compete and win, and that is exactly what you'll get. We will use the full range of powers at our disposal to protect our most sensitive sectors. Innovation and technology will help farmers produce more food, more sustainably, and more profitably. I'm delighted to announce the legislation to implement the Precision Breeding Act for plants in England has been laid in Parliament today. This offers huge potential to transform the plant breeding sector in England by enabling innovative products to be commercialised in years instead of in decades. And we are reinstating the Precision Breeding Industry Working Group so the whole food supply chain can work together to bring new food and feed products to market faster. We are investing in the UK agri-technology sector with a further £110 million in farming grants being announced today. In the spring, we'll launch new competitions under our Farming Innovation Programme for groundbreaking research that will help the sector transition towards net zero and unlock opportunities from the Precision Breeding Act. This is not just for the biggest farms. We will help farms of any size access technology that makes a real difference to the bottom line over the years ahead. Like the chemical-free cleaning for integrated milking equipment by Oxitec, funded through FIC, which boosts profits by lowering energy costs and chemical use. Our new ADOPT programme will fund farmer-led trials that bridge the gap between these new technologies and their use in the real world, showing farmers that their investments in new technology will deliver financial returns and boost profits. And once technologies and equipment hit the market, we are making them available through the Farming Equipment and Technology Fund. Products like the electric weeder, developed by Rootwave to reduce chemical use. We will launch another opportunity this spring to bring more products to the farm gate. Farms must be resilient to future challenges if they are to remain financially viable and strengthen food security. That includes severe flooding and droughts through to animal disease and geopolitical tensions that increase demands on our land for energy generation. Now, I know new tech doesn't bring the same benefits for every type of farm. We are investing to help farm businesses build resilience against animal diseases that can devastate livelihoods and threaten our entire economy, like the blue tongue virus, avian flu, or the recent case of foot and mouth that we saw in Germany. That's why we're investing £208 million to set up a new National Biosecurity Centre, modernising the Animal and Plant Health Agency facilities at Weybridge to protect farmers, food producers and exporters from disease outbreaks that can wipe out businesses in a moment. We are helping keepers of cattle, sheep and pigs in England improve the health, welfare and productivity of their animals by expanding the fully funded farm visits offer. Tom has raised with me, as he just did in his speech, the risk from illegal meat imports. More than 92,000 kilograms of illegal meat products were seized at ports across the UK over the last year. They carry huge risk of diseases such as African swine fever and foot and mouth getting into the country. We cannot tolerate this. I'm working with the Home Office and Border Force on plans to seize the cars, vans, trucks and coaches used by criminal gangs to smuggle illegal meat into our country and crush them so that they cannot be used again. I've listened to your concerns about other forms of crime as well. Crime damages farm profitability as you're forced to wait for farm or construction machinery to be replaced or clear rubbish that has been dumped in your gateways or on your land. The National Rural Crime Unit is already supporting forces to tackle rural crime around the country. To strengthen our approach to protect your profits, the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper will lay the legislation this year to better protect agricultural equipment like all-terrain vehicles by requiring immobilisers and forensic marking as standard. At the Oxford Farming Conference earlier this year, I announced new ways to help farmers remain profitable and viable even in a challenging harvest. We will consult on national planning reforms this spring to make it quicker for farmers to build new buildings, barns and other infrastructure to boost food production, and ensure permitted development rights work for farms to convert larger barns into a farm shop, a holiday let or a sports facility if that suits their business planning. We will get red tape out of the way so you can invest to become more profitable. I'm working with Ed Miliband and the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero so more farm businesses can connect their own electricity generation to the grid much faster, so you can sell surplus energy and diversify your income. The third element of our vision is nature. Restoring nature is vital to food production, not in competition with it. It's healthy soils, abundant pollinators and clean water that are the foundation of farm businesses that they rely on to produce high crop yields and turn over a profit. Without nature thriving, there can be no long-term food security. I want to thank everyone, upland, tenant, grassland farmers and others, everyone who is involved in our farming schemes. Almost 50,000 farm businesses are now in schemes, and around half of farmland in England is being managed to enhance nature while producing food. I recognise the frustration when we had to pause the capital grants offer last year without proper warning because of unprecedented levels of demand. I promised to update you as soon as I could, and I can confirm today that every application submitted for capital grants before the pause in November will be taken forward, and following this, we will reopen the Elm Capital Grants offer this summer. I'm also pleased to announce that we're investing £30 million to increase payment rates in higher level stewardship with immediate effect, to bring them more closely in line with our other farming schemes, something the NFU and others have long called for. You just called for it again, Tom. These farmers are the pioneers of nature-friendly farming, often based in upland areas. They deliver high-quality environmental outcomes. Now, finally, they will get a fair price for their work. There's a lot to be done to make British farming profitable and viable for the long term. I know we can only get there if we build the future together. We'll work with Tom, the NFU and farmers around the country to support farmers to keep producing the food we love to eat. This requires a new approach that recognises farms are businesses and businesses need to turn a fair profit. I'll play my part in creating the conditions for that to happen. I know you'll play your part in building resilient businesses that will innovate and succeed. Together, we will overcome the challenges this sector faces and give British farming the bright future this country knows we deserve. Thank you.
Hello, Secretary of State. There are a few rules. Can I ask that they are questions, that they are polite, to the point and short. Our aim here is to hear from as many people as possible. So if you can keep your questions short and indeed the answers to the point as well, then that will please everybody. You can ask questions via the app. Many people, it will not surprise you to know, have already started doing that. So if I could ask David Passmore, Joe Stanley and Tim Frampton to come to the microphones which you'll see in the aisles here. While they make their way, let me ask a question. And this is really an amalgamation of many of the questions that we've had. What they're asking, Secretary of State, is what do you really think of the inheritance tax policy? And what impact do you think it's having on your ability to deliver your agenda?
Well, I mean, first of all, I am genuinely sorry at the shock that that decision created across the sector. And it happened because we had inherited a much tougher financial situation than we expected.
It's a good idea.
And stabilising the economy is one of the most important things we need to do, not just for this sector, but for every sector in the economy. Now, I've spoken to people, every farmer's business. Businesses have tax advisors. If you take advice on succession planning, people can minimise their liability to the lowest level.
Just a moment. If you don't have a microphone, it's really difficult for everybody to hear you. So all they hear is rah, 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 which really doesn't, excuse me, it really doesn't get us anywhere. So if we can just let the Secretary of State speak.
Can reduce the liability to the lowest level that it needs to be. But I was struck. I spoke to farmers in the protest. I speak to Tom a lot. Tom doesn't hold back. Farmers generally don't hold back. And I was really struck by this phrase, the final straw, that I kept seeing. The protests were not just about one thing, they were about a whole sector that feels that they have been repeatedly let down by different decisions. And when you speak to people running businesses and putting in all the hours that I know farmers put in, I visited dozens of them last year. I see the strain on people's faces from all the work they're putting in. They're putting in all of that work, all of that effort, but they're not turning profit.
But given all that, do you think adding inheritance tax is helping the
thing I can do is focus on building profitability in this sector so farmers get a decent return for all the effort that they put in. Well, first of all, I'm really sorry about the individual circumstances. Genuinely and truly, I'm very, very sorry to hear that. But it's very difficult for me as Secretary of State to comment on individual circumstances. I can't do that. But I've explained to you why we had to take a decision that I know has been very, very difficult. But we will focus in the future on making farms more profitable. Because that seems to me...
Profitability won't help these people. As you say 7 years, they haven't got 7 years. An uplift in farm profits won't stop some of these people thinking of doing the unthinkable. It won't. It's just nonsense.
I hear what you're saying, but I genuinely can't comment on individual circumstances.
No, there's
What
countless
about the
people.
principle then
Yeah.
of people, many people who are in the same position as David's mum, when if they die before next April, they will feel that's doing their family a favour, Bruce.
Well, again, I'm not going to...
Surely there's a mechanism.
I'm not going to comment on circumstances like that. I mean, the fact
And
is...
you're not looking
If you're acknowledging that these people are just a bit of friendly fire, collateral damage of tax policy, that is appalling.
Even despite the change... I fully understand that there's anger about the decision, but even despite
The Secretary of State last
where the
week,
decision is,
but last week, Secretary of State, we offered a solution to your government that still raises the money, that takes all of those people out of the eye of this storm. The very fact that the government are not listening.
It is tough, I recognise that, Tom. We've had that conversation in private as well as having the conversation in public as we are now. But even despite the changes, farming will still only have to pay half the rate.
Oh, come on.
And it's true, and instead of paying it off in one go, they're on 10 years. to pay
These people have followed your word, but you wouldn't change it. It's just...
You lie. Well, we were told one set of circumstances about the financial state of the country and inherited a different set.
So, okay, these people wishing their lives away, just take it on the chin, there's a black hole.
Nobody
It's
should
just...
wish their lives away.
Yeah.
Nobody should wish their lives
Well, they are as a result of your policies. But they are.
But there is no consideration of a way round that, a loophole of you counting the 7 years as shorter if you're over a certain
The
age.
Chancellor announced the tax policy in the budget, and the Chancellor's been clear, as the government has been clear, that tax policies stand.
She hasn't been overly clear.
Let's move on. A question from Joe Stanley.
Joe Stanley, County Chair for Leicestershire, Northampton, Rutland. Secretary of State, I make no apologies for coming back to this issue because, regardless of everything you've just said in the last half hour, this is the issue which is sucking all the oxygen out of the room for everything else that we might try. When every farm business owner, farm finance expert, farm tax planner and farmer representative body is able to demonstrate to you and your government that you have your sums wrong on agricultural property and business relief, why do you continue to think you know better?
I'm very sorry that you take that view, but I don't agree with the premise of your question, that the figures are wrong. They're based on actual data, not projections, actual data. And I know as well, from speaking to tax planners, that if farmers, like any business, organise their succession planning, you can dramatically reduce reliability. That's the fact.
This is the real world, Secretary of State, not the theory world where everyone has a perfect way of minimising their tax take. And why, if this is all about maximum revenue for the Treasury, are you insisting on people to minimise their tax take? That seems like an arse about face way of doing it.
Every sensible business person should minimise their tax liability. Otherwise, you're paying more than you need to pay. That seems to me just common sense.
The Secretary of State last week, it was very clear that the Treasury haven't actually modelled whether this is an affordable tax, whether farmers can afford to pay the tax.
Well, they've given out data, but I think that data is correct. It's from the HMRC. It's actual.
There's no impact
It's from actual estates. It's from actual estates.
Can we, I'm just going to get a question from the app. Can I also get Ali Kappa, Richard Yates and Paul Tompkins up to the microphones? Thanks, Joe. This is a question from Mr. Frampton. His mother is 86. They reckon their tax bill will be 1.2 million on her death. Last year's profit was 60,000. He says, what do we sell to afford the tax bill? The land we use to grow the crops, to feed to the animals, the houses, or the machinery, or the animals? What's he supposed to do?
Well, like you know, I can't comment on individual circumstances.
But it's the principle.
I don't have all the data. You know, I need to have all of the accounts in front of me to know what they say. I just don't have that information. I can't comment on that.
Okay, we're going to move on. I know there are lots of questions on IHT. There are a lot of questions on other things, so let's move on. Ali Kappa.
Thanks. Ali Kappa, farmer, chairman, British Apples and Pears. With an 87-year-old father-in-law and a 57-year-old husband, 22-year-old and 18-year-old, and there's no way through this. My question is about investment. You want to grow our economy. Businesses need confidence and certainty to invest, and this government is prioritising growth in fruit and veg production, which we're really pleased about. The PO scheme that many of us depend on is ending at the end of this year, with no new scheme, no extension, no common sense. Inflation is rising, interest rates remain stubbornly high, and the IHT proposals are halting investment. What exactly is the government doing to create the environment to incentivise investment and growth in our sector?
You're illustrating how tough it's been in this sector, not just now, but actually for many years. A lot of the things I was just outlining in my speech are how we're starting to take action now to boost confidence and bring investment into the sector, what we'll be doing in the future, and how we'll be working, particularly on the farming roadmap, with the sector to do it together. Because I know that DEFRA on its own isn't going to come up with the right answers, but working with the NFU and other stakeholders and businesses in the sector, we have a much better chance of doing that. Fundamental to investment in this sector, but also every sector in the economy, is stability. And what we've not had, and what we've not, please, I didn't interrupt you while you were asking me the question. What we've not had, I said that very politely. What we've not had for the last 14 years is stability. You've had chop and change in policy, prime ministers, chancellors, volatility in interest rates. We're trying to build stability in the economy so we can get the confidence to invest in this economy in every single sector. And the reason that I was talking about profitability just then, and the need to boost profitability in the farming sector, is because growing profitability attracts more investment, because investors will be looking for a return on the money that they put in, just as younger people wanting to come into the sector will be looking to put in their effort in an area where they're going to get a decent reward for their work. So that is what we're doing. That was the theme of the entire speech that I just gave.
Just a quick unscientific show of hands. Who here has confidence at the moment to invest in their business?
You get an effective.
Okay, so it's a challenge.
Well, the reason I outlined all those things we want to change is because I recognise it's a huge challenge.
That is another sort of mushed together question. The NFU is talking about needing £4 billion a year in England, 5.6 billion across the UK to meet your environmental ambitions. If in the comprehensive spending review later this year the Chancellor says you can't have that money, because that's a lot of money, what's plan B?
Well, I can't speculate on the spending review that's still underway. We're having conversations with the Treasury, and so is every other department, but it's no mystery, it's no secret, the state of public finances and the economy that we have inherited. The Chancellor's been crystal clear that fiscal rules apply, because that's the way that we stabilise the economy, and there will undoubtedly be difficult decisions. I'm not going to guess what they might be in the future, but I think people who are lobbying, like the NFU, for change need to be realistic about the situation that we're operating in. And if you're saying, well, you want £1 billion extra put in this budget, you need to tell me what budget you want cut by £1 billion in order to put it in, because the reality of the situation is that's how it works.
Some questions on the land use framework and some concern about the fact that 9% of farmland is going to be taken out of production under the current proposal. What impact do you, the worry is the impact that will have then on our ability to feed ourselves?
Well, the land use framework is a consultation. We've got a consultation underway now. We will announce the conclusion of that in July. The NFU is participating in that. And that's the obviously the sensible thing to do. But even when the land use framework is finalised, there will be no compulsion. No one is going to force anyone to take anything out of agricultural production or do something else with it. What it will do is it will provide much better information to landowners so they can take the best decision for how they want to use that land.
So that's it, session's finished the morning one. We're now just about having lunch. Just going to go outside, you can hear the tractors. This is good, if you can hear me. Showing the progression in machinery and the cost. So just come out of conference, just going to meet Victoria Prentice for a coffee. Just gone past the Treasury buildings just here. Got Horse Guards Parade here as well. So nice area of London this is. And it's not cold either. So it's about, hear the clock going, about 8 o'clock on Tuesday evening. I've just been on GB News with Nigel Farage. Today the government have announced an increase in the defence budget, but I've just said to Nigel Farage, it's all very well and good them announcing the increase in the budget, but an army marches on its stomach, and without an adequate food supply in the country, how on earth is an increased army meant to march? So it's something I think well worth looking at and pointing out. Anyway, that's it for me. I might put the interview I did up with Nigel Farage and Jacob Rees-Mogg and others up on Sunday's update. So thanks ever so much for watching again, and we'll see you as ever 8 AM Sunday morning.